Thank you very much, Sami, for being here with me today and having a chat to me about some of the experiences and things that you've learnt over the years. And I guess one of the first questions that I wanted to ask you was, what has been your experience in working with mainstream schools, especially in terms of working with kids with special needs?
Sure. I think the biggest thing that's come up, I guess, throughout the last 15, 20 years is the lack of resources in the industry. So whilst you've got some families who are really fighting for an inclusive education, and it's really, really important, you might find that some of the welcome might be there in a mainstream school, but the resources aren't. So I think that even within a specialised school system, it's difficult to really meet the needs of any individual child, and more so in a mainstream school system. One of the other challenges we face is an educational challenge. So I guess the expectations of an educational level are not as great. So while there is a universal, a nationwide standard of what people need to learn, and within a specialised school system you certainly have smaller classes which enable, I guess, more contact, there is a much lower expectation. So what might one expect in a mainstream school in year 8, year 9, year 10 is not going to be the same of what one expects in a special school in year 8, year 9, year 10.
And have you seen mainstream schools inappropriately refer children to a specialised school environment where they absolutely have the abilities to be well served in a mainstream school, and perhaps it's more a lack of the school's ability to service them than it is the child's ability to be a part of their community.
Absolutely. And I think that this is one of the biggest fights that families face, is that, you know, we have policies in Australia and we have policies in Queensland that say that every child deserves a right to an inclusive education. So, you know, as a result, any child with a disability has a right to attend a mainstream school. And I understand the law to be that anywhere in the community, whether it be a workplace or a school place, that they must make reasonable allowances for that person to be able to access either that job, that school, and things like that. I think the biggest challenge at this particular point in time are attitudes and resources. Yeah. So people with a disability, even not with a disability, but generally people with a disability might require additional support. They might require additional support to be able to realise that educational expectation. They might need additional support in that social area. They might need additional support in all of these other areas. And unless families have the money and the resources to pay for a private support worker to be able to support that to happen, unfortunately our government doesn't allow that. So at this particular point in time, the Education Department and Disability Services don't talk very conducively together. I worked with one family who I resourced additional funding for, and we wanted to use that funding to fund a support worker to be able to support this young man at school who was in a special school who was having an incredibly difficult time at that particular point. But we weren't able to because the Disability Services would say that the funding is to be used for disability services, because as soon as he steps into school, it's an education issue, and the Education Department needed to be able to respond to that. So I think there's so much bureaucracy and so much red tape that the families have to fight through, and especially when they're looking at having an effective education for their son or daughter, I think unfortunately sometimes the fight is too big, and when they're fighting for years and years and years and continually hitting brick walls and not seeing an appropriate outcome for their son or daughter, special school is just easier.